Here's scientists, archaeologists, historians, biblical scholars have been asking the question, was Noah's flood real? And of course, people of a religious bent, and certainly in the Abrahamic faiths, they believe it is. But we atheists tend to think of everything biblical as being mythical, which is not necessarily the case. And tonight we have someone who's going to present scientific evidence that a flood actually occurred. Our guest is Dr. Walter C. Pittman III. He is a professor in Columbia University's Department of Earth and Environmental Sciences. He's an award-winning marine geophysicist. Say that backwards 3 times. He asserts that there is enough geological evidence that scientists are able to say with certainty that Noah's flood took place in the Black Sea at around 5500 BCE. And he and his colleague William Ryan have written a book entitled Noah's Flood, which has been published in 9 different languages, including Japanese and Hebrew, and is available on Amazon. The research has revealed that there apparently it was a terrifying rapid rise in sea level, and to anyone living in Mesopotamia at the time, of course, that would have seemed like the end of the world. So it's a fascinating story, and I'm going to get out of the way and let the expert do the talking. So please welcome Dr. Walter C. Pittman.
Right up in here, and this is Seal Marmara, and this is the Dardanelles right here. And we Bill, most of these are what Bill got in subsequent years, Bill Ryan. Okay, let's see, where are we here? Okay. The area between the Crimea is right here, and the Romanian coast, the Danube Delta, right up in here. This is from an old Russian paper, but this was one thing that excited us, is that the sediment cover was extremely thin. And this water depth out here is 100 meters, and the sediment cover on that was extremely thin. And the Russians cored through that sediment, they found coquina, and coquina is just a shell hash. It's just broken up shells, the kind of things you get if you take a bunch of shells and expose them to the surf. So the data very strongly, from the Russian literature, we couldn't see any of this, the data strongly suggested that this, back at some time, not too many thousands of years, have been exposed to the wash of waves. So we went out on that first cruise and we obtained data in these squares. This is what's called the Kerch Strait. The Don River comes right out between those 2 grayish pieces of land. And we looked right at the shelf edge down there, and then over on the west side, we went around the Crimea, went by Gorbachev's last dacha, and then went over here and worked in that block over there and obtained a lot of sediment cores, eventually getting enough for each one of these dots, going right up over from deeper water, right up over the shelf, right up into the middle of this Danube Delta area. So this is the kind of stuff we got. We're looking at this is at a depth of 120 meters. That's what that line is. So we're looking at what's called seismic reflection profiles that go from up on the shelf. We were too interested in the shelf, but go right over the shelf edge. And I'm going to give you an interpretation of this right away. You see this red line. On top of that red line is a little thin layer of very muddy, mushy, wet sediment. Below that line, when we took a sediment core, it's very dry. And you notice these strata. These are strata that go up like this, up to that line. So this is an erosional surface. These strata obviously continue upward and over, but they've been eroded away, and this layer of sediment has been put on top. What this seismic reflection work does is, what you're doing is you're towing a torpedo-like device behind a ship, and it's letting out a sound. Weep, 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 weep. That sound goes to the bottom, and it's reflected off of the bottom, and the bounced sound is recorded, goes into that torpedo, and it's all analyzed on the computer. Some of the sound penetrates the bottom, and is reflected off of the layers. And some of the sound So you, for every beat, you get some that penetrates the bottom and is reflected off of a deeper layer, and some that's reflected off of an even deeper layer. So what it does, it gives you a picture like a cake, a layered cake. And it's just like you could cut that layered cake in half and you look at it from the side. That's exactly the picture that you see with this type of equipment. And you know, it's very nice, but uninteresting if it's really is a layered cake with layers, but it's often not. Like, see, we have crooked radar. So if you have a, like this is happening down on the Mississippi right now, is the sediment comes out and it dumps over the edge into the deep water. It dumps over the layer after layer, it dump over the edge into the deep water. And then if sea level drops, that whole upper part where the knuckles are, that'll all get eroded, and that's what's happening. It's all been eroded away. So that this tells us right at this, that sea level down here somewhere near 120 meters erode this surface, to erode that. And we got a lot of this data. Come on. Okay. We got this kind of a data too, up on the shelf, up in what is now the flat area where the upper surface is somewhat less than 100 meters, maybe it's about 80 meters. And so we were floating right across the top of this. The water was fairly deep, and but at some time it must have been exposed because it dug this trough right into the old shelf like that, and it dug it right through straight. These are flat lines straighta in here, like the layer cake, and it just dug right into those flat lines straighta. It's just as though you took that layer cake and you just took a big scoop and you scooped out a whole bunch out of the top. And then, when the water got deep again, it infilled, and it infilled with this very sloppy sediment that I was talking about, really soupy, awful, kind of smelly stuff too. But, right? Somebody say something? Oh, okay. So again, this was a clear indication that sea level probably got right down to this point here. You know, this is about 100, 120 meters, and we found a lot of this wherever we surveyed. Okay. Okay, and that's that red line is underlying the drape. That is the erosional surface, and it's cut right into these flat lines straight. It's a little hard to see it. You kind of have to practice this kind of thing. But and then here's another one in which we have a drape of sediment sitting over the top of sand dunes. These are small sand dunes collected in a subaerial environment. You can get things that look like sand dunes underwater, but you can tell if you can take a sediment core and penetrate them, you can tell whether they were published subaerially or subaqueously. These, when they were penetrated, were seen to have been formed in a subaerial environment, and it was just wind-blown sand. And we have a lot of data now, but this is a sample. Here's some more, showing these 4 set beds, the beds that, you know, the sediment comes out to the shelf, to the edge, like the edge of the Mississippi Delta, comes out to the edge and goes over the side and is deposited with a little thin layer on top and a thicker layer sitting out in front of that nose. And then sea level drops, and all of this is eroded off.
The slides reversed.
Huh?
The slides reversed. It's hard to read the printing.
Well, I wish I could turn it around, but I can't. But yeah, I'm sorry.
Sorry. I get the point.
Yeah, yeah. And you can see these come right up into that surface. And when we took sediment cores in here, we went through this slop. We got into what were obviously bleached, broken up shells, this coquina, stuff that had been really messed up at some time or another, into this dry coquina, these shells. And this is what you would call, this is an unconformity. It's just straight. It just looks like this, like so. That's all, you know, an erosional unconformity. And more of the same. This is actually on the Danube side, but the same kind of a thing. So sea level was down 100, 120 meters. We're very certain now that it was down at least 95. It might have been more. But we're now, with a lot more data, from the area of both the north and south side of the Black Sea. We can see it. Okay. This is just an example of the consequence of this erosion, of the deposition and then the erosion we see along here. This is the shelf edge out here now. I mean, the shelf edge is out here. Sea level is way up there. But we see these are dunes, a dune field published subaerially right out near the shelf edge, and it was subaerial when it was deposited, so sea level must have been down 100 meters. And this is a bunch of sediment cores that we took. Just a look at some of these sediment cores, or some of the. Here's the water content, and we're going down in the core, and we were able to measure the sediment and the water content. And so on top, this is water content right here. At the surface of that sediment with that muddy crap that was sitting on top, very gooey, a very high water content, almost 80%. As soon as you hit that level where you went into the coquina, the water content dropped like that. And the density absolutely followed the reverse, because this water is not that dense. The shells are much more dense than the water, so the watery part is going to be less dense than the part below that surface. We had when we were getting ready to go on this first trip, we were in a dacha, old dacha, a beautiful thing that was just wrecked. Terrible shame that it was so badly wrecked, but it obviously belonged to some aristocrat before the revolution, and they had a beautiful pine forest in the back of it. And before we left, I noticed the sailors were all picking up bags and bags of pine cones, and we found out why. Because at one point when we got out to sea, we had a cookout on deck for the scientists and the Russian officers of the ship, and they used the pine cones to fuel the fire. But to go along with that, to make the pine cones, the smoking pine cones, a little more tolerable, some of the most beautiful wine I've ever had. And the day is not complete without a little vodka in that part of the world, so we also had a little bit of vodka too, which was also of a very excellent quality. A map of sediment cores, you see those lines that tell the shape of the sediment. Yeah, okay. And when the cores penetrated, they found that these areas that say dry were very dry. Obviously what had been happening is they were exposed, and they simply dried out. The sediment just simply dried out. When it dries out, you remove the interstitial water, the grains begin to come together. But it was very evident it had been dried. It was also evident that a lot of the shells had been bleached. Mud cracks, we saw mud cracks too. We actually saw pieces of vegetation in the sediment cores. And we obtained dates on those. And the dates indicated that this catastrophic flood had happened about 7,500 years ago, or 5,500 BC. And since then, we've had an awful lot of argument from a variety of anthropologists and archaeologists and scientists who have said, no, the dates are all wrong, but it's been reaffirmed in the past couple of years. Yes, 7,500 years ago, the Black Sea was down almost 100 meters, and it was instantaneously re-flooded. I'll talk a little bit about the rapidity of the flooding in just a couple of minutes. This is all. Okay. Okay, one of the other things that we found out there that actually Bill Ryan found in a subsequent trip out there was sort of off the Romanian or Bulgarian coast, I can't remember which, and this is sort of a colored picture of the bottom, including topography off into the deep water. But this is what they saw in the seismic profiles. These are coastal sand dunes formed in a subaerial environment. Last summer, Bill went back in and found more of those off the coast of Bulgaria, and the depth down to the bottom of those is about 95 meters. So this indicates that that was exposed. That's the only way you can form sand dunes. They were subaerial sand dunes, very close to the present-day shelf edge in Bulgaria and Romania, and dry as hell, you know, covered by that little thin layer of very sloppy mud. And other profiles across showing various formations that were found, that were formed during and after the flood, a river channel that was cut right across the shelf, and then subsequently filled with a set of prograding sediment. But here is the river channel in here, and here's the upper surface of it when it was filled with sediment when sea level came up, and then on top of this, a set of 4 subdates. But again, we know the timing of this. We know roughly when this went down, but we do know when it came up, which was about 7,500 years ago. Drape, that's that mucky sediment that sits on top. Filled river channels cut when the sea level was down, and filled when the sea level came back up. And again, the timing is approximately 7,500 years before present. When I say approximately, I'm talking about really within a few decades. You know, I think we're that certain of the timing. And as I'll show you, there's no way to get a slow sea level rise in that part of the world. It's either going to be not rising, or rising at a very slow rate, or extremely fast, because it's just due to the hydrology of the area. So before the flood, 5600 BC or 5600 BC, the Sea of Marmara, the Dardanelles, and the Bosporus. The Bosporus at that time was probably not it was probably a river channel, the Golden Horn river channel that went out from Istanbul and on down into the Black Sea. Not a very particularly active river channel, but it had cut a groove in the landscape. There wasn't enough water running through it to have any really significant deep erosion. If you look at this is the Dardanelles. So we're going to take a look at a profile across the Dardanelles and then one across the present-day Bosporus. The Dardanelles as it is today, the Bosporus as it is today. And again, this is seismic reflection data obtained, you know, with these one of these gadgets that shoots off of sound every few seconds, and it's the reflection data is processed through a computer to give a picture like this. So in the Dardanelles, the depth is down this is about 100 milliseconds or 85 meters down, right down to this bottom. It's an erosion surface, and here's the shape of the sediment fill. This is obviously sediment that's been deposited in fairly rapidly running water. That's why it has that shape. Okay, the Bosporus. This is what the Bosporus looks like today. The Black Sea at the top, the Bosporus comes down like this, down like so, into the Sea of Marmara. My friend Jalal Şengör, who I visited many, many times, lives right up there. Here's Istanbul right over here. He lives right up there, about 100 meters above the level of the Bosporus, and it's just fabulous. You can stand out on his front porch. There's so much marble over there. The floor of his garage is made of white marble. You know. I find that absolutely repulsive. What a thing to do to nice white marble that didn't do him any harm. I mean, it was perfectly nice to him. But stand out on that front porch of his and look up and down the Bosporus and think of the Xerxes and the Persians who crossed that in ancient times. And it's about 800 meters wide up there. And the bottom is about 50, 60, 70 meters down. There's a bottom current that flows northward, bringing Mediterranean water into the Black Sea, and a top current that flows southward. How these guys, the Persians, built a bridge and sent 100,000 people across that bridge. How in the world they did that? It's beyond my imagination. They did that, you know, something with a BC until finally Alexander the Great beat the crap out of them. But anyway, that is the Bosphorus, and at the time we are talking about, before the flood, it might have been a river, but nothing much more than a river. Now it's a pretty deep groove cut in the landscape. Here's another picture of the Bosphorus. And we're looking from this unfortunately is blue color, and it shouldn't be. This is looking to the north as the Bosphorus exits out into the Black Sea, and this is a debris fan, which Bill Ryan sampled. This flood was caused by water coming through the Bosphorus, and it came through as fast as we think it came through. There should be a lot of debris that was carried out by the rushing water. And that is a debris fan. They sampled the debris, which is out in the Black Sea, on the Black Sea shelf, and that debris is from the walls of the Bosphorus, which is cut like a groove right through some very old rock. The amount of water, I'll give you an advance warning, the amount of water that was flowing through the Bosphorus when the flood of 50 cubic kilometers a day, which is enough to cover the island of Manhattan 1.5 to 2 times the height of the Empire State Building every day. The whole island of Manhattan, an incredible amount of water. 200 or 300 times that of Niagara Falls, which is, if you've been to Niagara Falls, you know how impressive it is. And it would have scared the crap out of the people living up around there back 7,500 years ago. The Bosphorus Channel, the depth to that sediment-filled trough in the middle is about 109 meters. And that, we think, was cut at the time of the flood. Okay, in the Black Sea itself, as an indication of the flood, there was what's called sapropel. The sapropel is formed when the water lacks oxygen, and you get these smelly, awful biota dying in the bottom and getting buried. And it can be very dangerous because if you take a sediment core, you can get a lot of hydrogen sulfide out of it, which is a poisonous gas. So it's the kind of thing that what you're looking at these sediment cores, you do it out in the open to get rid of the gas. But the sapropels were dated all over the basin, and that's the boundary between when it was a lake, a freshwater lake, and it was in contact with the Mediterranean. That boundary all over, from the deepest water to the shallowest, is 7,540 years, plus or minus 130 years. So, and that dates, so that gives us a date, another date of the time of the flood. By about 7,500 years before present, sea level had risen. You remember what I was talking about is ice melting. And the Black Sea stayed down. It was dry, just like the Caspian Sea is today. It was dry, so it was down well below sea level, like the Dead Sea is, like the Sea of Galilee. All of those are disconnected from the world ocean. They have rivers flowing into them, but all of that water that flows on the rivers is lost to evaporation, and so they stay well below sea level. The Dead Sea is well below sea level, a few hundred meters, I think, below sea level. And the same thing was happening in the Black Sea. It was sitting there, getting water from the rivers that flow into it, but it was evaporating and staying well below sea level. Okay, by 7,500 years BP, the sea level from just due to the outside in the Atlantic, the Mediterranean, the Aegean, and in Marmara had risen to within 15 meters of the present, which was just high enough for it to slip in through that Bosporus River, that probably what you would call the Golden Horn River, just enough to get in and start flowing. And now, what's going on here is you know, when you tip up a watering can, the water flows out fast and then it slows down. But if you had a gigantic water can that basically had an infinite amount of water in it, as you tilt it up and it begins to cut a groove, it's going to flow faster and faster and faster and faster and faster. So as the water flowed out of the world's oceans, through Marmara, through the Black Sea groove, as it cut the groove deeper, the water flowed faster. Because it was flowing faster, it was cutting faster. Because it was cutting faster, it was cutting deeper. Because it was cutting deeper, it was flowing faster. On and on and on, until 50 cubic kilometers per day, 12 cubic miles. That's an incredible amount of water. And it's not a lot of BS. We've even had antagonistic, not antagonistic, I can't call